I think we talked about, we do use the SFMA on a regular basis in our clinic, and that's kind of the foundational part of the evaluation from an objective standpoint. Is let's go through the top tier and go from there. We may not do every single breakout, that's for sure, but we use that information to say, okay, where do we go? And then the next step would really be to think about the joint by joint approach, and we're looking for, does the ankle dorsiflex, does the hip move, and does the thoracic spine rotate and extend essentially. So do we get those movements? If you don't have those movements, then you need to pretty much stop and go get those movements, because if they're not there, that's what's probably leading to your problem. If you look at the orthopedic nature of the world, most people have back pain, low back pain, and then shoulder pain, and then knee pain. So those are your top three issues. All of those are surrounded by joints that tend to get stiff, right? So your shoulder gets hurt because your thoracic spine is stiff. Your low back hurts because your thoracic spine, your hips are both stiff. Then your knee hurts with the hip and ankle stiffness, and it sits in between. So we see this pattern over and over and over again. So when I'm doing a movement screen, I'm looking for those three mobility segments. Then if you get that cleared and those things are moving better and moving well, which is what we're talking about here, is like, what does the person do best? You have to start to look at kinetic linking and the kinetic chain. Is how, at the end of the day, when you're looking at someone's success in movement, it's how well does force transfer through the body. So can someone put force through the ground and then transfer it into something they're lifting or something they're pushing or something they're throwing? Can they transfer load from the earth into an implement or into something they're carrying or whatever it might be? So can they transfer force? And if they can't, the point that they fail is probably where the pain is going to be. So to Russ's point, I'm looking at the guy with no S. He's probably not hip hinging very well. So he's just flexing at the spine and right out of the gate going to lift it off the ground. He's probably going to fail because he's not able to use his lower extremity pattern very effectively. So you have to think about, how is this person transferring energy through the body, and where is all the force going? And where it ends up going is usually where your point of breakdown is going to be. And our job ultimately is, how do we make that transfer smoothly? How do you load a system and transfer energy through that system in an effective way? I would say that the biggest thing, to take away here on when we talk about posture and this idea of what have they done 10,000 times and stuff is fantastic. And I use the thought process of that everyone's training. You're always training, right? And the concept that change is inevitable. That you're always going to be evolving and changing. So someone might say, well, I haven't trained in a long time. Well, what have you been doing? Well, I've been sitting at my desk. Well, then you have been training. You've been training to sit really well. I bet your cardiovascular system is shit. I bet your hamstrings are tight. I bet you got no abs, no ass, to your point. You probably got a little flexed spine posture. You have been training. You just didn't realize it, But your body's adapting every day to say, like, well, if you're not going to make me go sprint or go do something athletic or something demanding, then I'm just going to whittle away and get weaker and weaker until because I don't have to use those things, right? And so then all of a sudden you stand up and you're like, hey, it's the weekend and I'm going to go, work on my house or do something. And then all of a sudden we've got problems because you're not conditioned for it. My dad has a great story on this. It's funny. He worked for 35 years, mechanical engineer, sat a good amount of it, had an hour and a half commute into the Bay Area and then back out of the Bay Area. So he's like in the car 2-3 hours a day. When he retired and he started work, went back to the house. He grew up on a farm, so he's active, he's never worked out a day in his life, but he's like in shape, like healthy, like active person. He was sore for a year. He said that to me. He goes, like, my back is sore, my hips are sore, my thighs are sore, my shoulders are sore, because he's working on the house all day. And for the prior 35 years, he's been sitting at a desk, like looking at a computer, working on making parts for trains. Yeah. So it was a really interesting transition for him. And then now it's been 5 or 6 years removed, and he's great. But so that adaptation takes time, and your body's always adapting would be one of my main thoughts.